Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 85. Last week, we spoke to Blythe in Zimbabwe, which is very interesting. Blythe from Zimbabwe studied at SRUC in Scotland and has went back and is now an agronomist with a focus on flowers, but also working with blueberries. Some the size of a golf ball, which I did not know was possible, which is great fun. And next week, we'll be speaking to the female hoof trimmer, Sophie Mitchell. I forgot her surname, Sophie Mitchell-Smith. We've all heard of hoof trimming on the YouTube scene, certainly with Stranraer's own Graham Parker sort of leading the way there. Sophie also has a big following there at Dad and her business. So yeah, another good one coming up there. But today we're talking about a group of people, a company that has been around the barony. I've been hearing the name, been hearing what it is, and I'm quite looking forward to sort of knowing what it is and what's involved. And that is the digital dairy chain. Today, we have three people on the call and maybe one coming later, but those that are definitely here are Stuart Martin, Pauline Murray, and Dr. Rachel. Is it Wakefield? Is that right, Rachel? Have I got that right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And potentially Ant Hobson and Mark Robertson coming later. What I like to do in this is the R2Kast people in food and farm, and I sort of like to hear the people stories first, hear where people have came from before we actually get into the business at the sort of heart of the topic. So, Stuart, we'll start with yourself. Stuart, could you tell us a bit about yourself, maybe before being involved in the digital dairy chain and how you sort of came to get involved?
Just before we get started with another episode of the R2Kast, I would like to thank our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan Rural are heavily involved on the social media scene in the ag space with 120,000 followers on Instagram. They use this following to host social media takeovers with farmers throughout the country to showcase their stories. They also post to their rural community blog with further stories about these people in the industry. On top of this, they like to support initiatives that are championing the British agricultural industry, such as myself. So thank you to A-Plan Rural for that.
Yeah, no problem, Wallace, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to come and speak to you and all the people that will listen to this. My background principally is sales and marketing. That's what I did my degree in all these years ago, and I then worked for a company in Denmark at the time, a design company out there. Then came back to the UK and worked for a packaging company, and became a packaging technologist. And we were principally dealing with printing. I think the interesting thing, and a slight crossover to what I'm doing now, is I got involved in manufacturing, dealing with a lot of companies, from companies doing cosmetics to food and drink to whiskey, people that were importing, exporting. And it was fascinating. What I saw was loads of factories doing lots of different things, and we were advising them how to best package their products. And then about 20 years ago, it was my first foray into agriculture. I applied for the job to be the marketing director of Scottish organic milk producers. And at the time, that was a co-op of, I think it was about 25 organic dairy farmers who at the time had, I think, just converted to organic. And the vast majority of their milk, though, was entering the non-organic chain because they had no consumers for it. So the farmers, they were a bit skeptical of me, and I was a bit skeptical of them. I didn't know farming and they didn't know marketing. But we agreed that I would stick to the business side of it and they would stick to feeding the cows and milking them, and then we'd meet in between. And the great news, I mean, after about 10 years, we took sales of about 500,000 litres a year up to 25 million. In fact, at the end, we ran out of milk. We didn't have enough, and we had to get more producers coming on board. And that was because we basically, again, not too dissimilar to the project we're going to talk about later, was we talked to the supply chain, we talked to the farmers, we understood how they worked. We spoke to people like SRUC, SEC, HDB, bodies like that, Soil Association were handling them. We spoke to all the buyers of the products, and we did a lot of consumer research as well, and talked to really the whole supply chain from cow to consumer. After that, about 8 years ago, I then took up the role to set up the Scottish Dairy Hub in Scotland, which was an initiative funded by, at the time, AHDB and Scottish Government. And it was basically to have a one-stop shop signposting service for dairy farmers in Scotland. The theory at the time was that the average dairy farmer was battling a very low milk price, and very busy guys. Again, such as the nature of staff and recruitment, there were maybe one-man bands. and yet they were being bombarded with a lot of information on a daily basis, and sometimes they didn't have time to disseminate information or use that information. So the whole point about the hub, it was a call center, and you could contact the hub at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, through various mediums, ask any questions covering recruitment, AI, staff training. We got things about courses, absolutely any topic on dairy, and we would go and find the advice free of charge for them. And that worked very well. The project was only meant to run for 3 years, but it is still to this day continuing after 8 years. Halfway through that, about 4 years into that, I was offered the position to be dairy policy manager at NFUS. So what we agreed to do was take the hub from ownership from HDB to NFUS. So for the last 4 years and up until now, the hub has been funded by Scottish Government and NFUS. And for the last 4 years, then I was concentrating a lot of my work on dairy policy work on a daily basis, dealing everything, you know, from milk contracts to dealing with processors to looking at legislation. The ag bill that's coming through was taking up a lot of time, and you know, initiatives. You know, I sat on the Red Tractor Technical Advisory Committee as well, inputting to that. So, yeah. So I think in summary, 20 years in farming, dairy farming. You know, 99.9% of dairy farming, and built up quite a good knowledge and a good range of Scottish dairy farming from there.
Excellent. So it's certainly pretty well versed for what you're doing, I would say. You sort of covered every side for quite a period of time. Rachel, could you just give us sort of the exact same on your background, where you sort of came from and how you came to be where you are?
I can, yes. So I grew up in Cumbria, in rural Cumbria, which is not difficult to grow up in rural Cumbria, and surrounded by farms. And I always had an interest in environmental science. And this was like 40 years ago now. And then it was all about acid rain and the kind of pesticides impact in in the environment. And I was quite interested in that. So I went off to do a degree, and I ended up moving up to Aberdeen to do a PhD in soil science. That was in the plant and soil science in Aberdeen in that time, and I learned an awful lot about land use, soil function, soil health, all sorts of things. Through that program, and then I ended up doing a postdoc. And that was still in Aberdeen, and that was all around understanding biodeterioration mechanisms of natural materials and built environment. But the interesting thing about that was I ended up doing a project with a bunch of optoelectronics scientists who were really into lasers. And at that time, the market was just emerging, the blue LEDs. You probably are all too young to remember that, but the blue LED was launched onto the market. And for us as scientists at that price, it meant that we could start bringing things out of the lab into the field, because that blue LED which was the exact right wavelength for photosynthesis and other photosynthetic pigments. So we built, and also at that time, it was a big revolution in manufacturing. So a lot of the electronics components were being miniaturized, so that we have our little modules now that we can buy. But in that time, it was revolutionary. So it meant that you began to see a lot of devices being built that were based on lab instrumentation, but you could take out into the field. And that's what we started doing. We were looking at patina, and I was using these the devices to map the growth of things on surfaces. But again, I began to learn a lot about lasers, optoelectronics, and basically spectroscopy. And so after a bit of that, a group of us started up a company, and because we were in Aberdeen, we were focused really on oil and gas and subsea, and that was taking all of these things that we'd learned and building devices that we could do sensing offshore and underwater at much lower cost, because that was the basic lever. And then after a bit of that, I went back into the university sector to help academics spin out companies and help to transfer the emerging tech coming out of universities into the marketplace, which is the hardest thing in the world. Commercializing science tech is really hard, and commercializing stuff that's coming out of academia is equally hard as well. So that was a bit of that. And then so that was all around engineering. So again, I acquired secondhand knowledge about a whole wealth of science areas and a good feel for what was new and emerging. And then again, 10 years ago, the Scottish Funding Council and ScotGov wanted to invest in the innovation centres that were a bridge between academia and industry. And it asked the economic development agencies like Scottish Enterprise to work with academia to develop engagement models for certain sectors. So there are 6 innovation centres now. There were 7 10 years ago, and one was oil and gas. But so these were, and all of the engagement models were slightly different. So we've got industrial biotech and data lab and aquaculture, and we have and Census, which is where I'm employed now. And Census used to stand for the Centre for Sensors and Imaging Systems, as seeing as an economic strength within Scotland, and now we're just known as Census, but we focus on IoT, sensing and imaging tech. So, but now the last 2 years, my soil science background that kind of sank below the waves is now coming back up again for all around soil health and sequestration and land management. So I'm really I'm loving my job at the moment. It's really varied and very interesting.
Well, do you know, the first 2 things that jump out to me there, Rachel, is first off, I had you early to mid 30s. We're miles.
Oh no, I'm really old. Oh, I've been around the block a few times. So just kind of absorb things,
Well, here, take that as a compliment, please. But also, that was just, do you know how like the first time you ever find a dictionary when you're younger and you look at all these words that don't mean anything? That was just an audio version of that for me. I mean, spectrometry and all these things. Is that looking at like pigment spectrum? Is that what you meant?
Yeah, it can. Right, okay. Yeah, it's shining a light at something, and then the information you get back will tell you a bit about what it's made up of.
See, that's what I love about this podcast. Like, I mean, I bring these people on and I don't have a clue what you've just told me. But no, that makes sense then, if that's what you mean. I'll come back to that, and I do have a few questions about what different things meant there, because you did lose me quite a bit. But see, the one thing that I was going to mention was, in my master's year, I was at Glasgow Uni doing food security, and Strathclyde contacted me about doing a dissertation on like a co-dissertation from Uni of Glasgow and Strathclyde on precision agriculture, with a focus on livestock precision agriculture using IoT to monitor rumen monitoring boluses. And I was just going to ask you if you knew of a guy whose name, oh, that's terrible. I'm going to have to come back to this. I think it's Isaac. It's not Isaac. I'm going to have to come back because he'd worked with Census. I'll try and remember as we go on. I'll probably remember the second we stop recording.
Oh, no. You're asking me now.
Pauline, could you give us the same sort of background for yourself, please? That'd be excellent.
Sure, no worries. So I'm from Glasgow, and I'm based at Strathclyde University, which is obviously one of the 3 academic partners within Digital Dairy Chain. Going back, I've been working in project management for around 20 odd, between 25 years maybe now, right, which is quite scary when you kind of look back. I've always kind of, my undergraduate actually degree was in archaeology down in Manchester, which is completely nothing to do with any of this and completely nothing to do with project management either. But what I kind of discovered when I was at uni was I kind of moved in towards the sort of exhibitions and stuff at museums and managing that sort of a thing, and that's how I kind of came into project management. So my sort of a skill set lies within that, particularly because I've worked within the higher education sector for most of that time. And that's my sort of a forte on all this. I don't have, this is my first food and drink related project. I've worked in different research projects, health projects, advanced manufacturing, bloodborne viruses, a whole host of different projects. But that's what I like about what I do, because I get to use the skills that I have in project management to kind of help, whatever project it is that I'm working on.
Well,
no, sorry, on you go.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think sometimes we hear, people come into these things and they don't have the exact technical knowledge, but the amount of transferable skills is it's mental. Sorry.
No, that's exactly it, and it's amazing how much information you pick up. So sometimes I kind of think of my role as a bit boring in a sense. I mean, it's not boring to me because I'm, a bit of a geek when it comes to project management and being organised and plans and stuff like that, and risk registers and all that. That's kind of my forte, but I think it's needed. It's good, obviously. As I say, I've been working in the university higher education sector, but it's mainly between that link between, as Rachel said, academia and industry. And industry work at generally a much faster pace than what the universities do, and it's kind of trying to manage those expectations, manage the processes and stuff around, a lot of the projects and stuff that we do. And that's where I feel that my sort of expertise lies. So yeah, it's a total baptism of fire when it comes to this sort of a type of project. So I was down at the Barony for the first time the other day last week. So that was really nice to see, and yeah, so it's really good just kind of getting on board with everything.
It's a nice place, whether that's I mean, I did my undergraduate through SRUC, but I was in Ayr, and Ayr was a lovely campus, but it was based bang smack in the middle of a town, and where Barony sort of sells itself, especially from the academic perspective, is you've got that farm there to teach practicals as well, and it plays very much well nicely into this. Stuart, one thing I wanted to ask yourself was sort of jumping back to what you'd said earlier. You started working in the organic milk producers, or I've probably said the wrong name there, but working with organic milk producers. They must have been few and far between there, and you said sort of the difference in milk production, the levels there, sort of in your time. But what was the difference, can you remember, in producers from when you started with them until when you finished? Because that would have been, I assume people started to see it and
producer numbers. I think at the time when I started, it was maybe about 16, 17. And it it didn't end, it's still running, but when I left it, it'd gone up to about 25. Now, at the time, maybe 1,200 dairy farmers in Scotland. So it was very, very small percentage. And in fact, at the time, we always, in our heads, and we worked very close collaborators with First Milk and Omsco at the time, who's the larger UK co-op for dairy farmers for organic. And roughly the organic market, and I think it probably still is roughly 5% of the whole dairy in the UK. But it grew. It was growing, and things like the recession affect it, and economic conditions affect it, and supply and demand is constrained by that because of the supply that it has. But yeah, so it's still very small to this day in Scotland. But at the time, the farmers got involved in it for a number of reasons. I think at the time they're set up on their farms, the size thing. Problems about succession, they couldn't put on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 cows. Our average output for the year, I remember, was I think 800,000 litres a year. That's what the average farm is doing, and a lot of them were doing it again for purely organic reasons. They believed in the ethos, and some were doing it for financial, and some were doing it because it suited their system. And a lot of them were based down in Dumfries and Galloway, the area we're operating in just now, and that was because the organic system suits grazing systems, and that's what Dumfries and Galloway does very well.
I mean, Dumfries and Galloway and Ayrshire leans itself to high rain counts, high rain, just perfect for grass, like it's ideal. And you also mentioned you worked got involved with the Scottish Dairy Hub 8 years ago, or there with 8 years ago. That was when the price was bad. That was when it was in a bad place.
Yeah, and again, that was clearly not good for anybody, but quite good for me, because what I do, and one of the strengths I'd say about Stuart Martin, this sounds like a job interview, is I'm quite tenacious. If somebody gives me a problem, I will own it and run with it. And I genuinely had farmers that, I remember one call from a farmer almost in tears, and he was getting single digit on his milk price. And what we did, we went to visit him, understood his issues, and we looked around, and he got a new milk buyer, and we changed how he farmed, and without sounding too grand, but changed his life. So yeah, what was, again, fortuitous for the project, but maybe not for the industry, was because it was in a bad place, I was getting a lot of incoming calls because people wanted to speak to people. You know, it was very much that. It was a one-to-one service, and we would listen, we would take the inquiry, go and speak to the farmer, and see the problem through. Yeah.
No, I was aware of people in single myself. It was a bad time. That was sort of when I just started uni, and you were sort of looking into price quite often and that. And yeah, it was not a place we want to see yourself again.
No. Well, I mean, you know, we talk about sustainability, and sometimes people misinterpret what that means. But you know, dairy farmers need profit, because dairy farmers need profit so they can invest, so they can grow, and so they can do all the things that they're meant to do, and all the things that other people are asking them to do. You know,
I think we often think of sustainability in an environmental perspective, but we don't have the ability to be environmentally sustainable if we're not financially sustainable, because we're not there. Yeah. It
was in.
I would just like to quickly interrupt the show for a minute to give you some extra information on our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan offer bespoke cover for farms and estates the UK over, and will give you tailored insurance for anything on the farm, from your old workhorse tractor that's been around 20 years or a fancy new and exciting diversification.
Interesting, it was one of the sort of mantras that I heard was at NFUS. We talked about, you know, a good, you know, sustainable farm as in net zero, and somebody had this great line that if you're a good sustainable farm, then you'll be a good farm. Yeah.
Yes, agreed. And I'm not going to. I've spoke a few times in the podcast about carbon and how I feel it's not correctly calculated and whatnot. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'll move. Rachel, I said I was going to come back, and I have remembered the name first off. Ivan Andanovich.
Oh yes, Strathclyde.
Is it Strathclyde? Sorry, I'll just jump in there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was some guy. He first came to. I'm from Isle of Arran, and we have no broadband over there. But it was really bad, like lower than 1 megabit a second. And this guy, basically, not Ivan, but someone had sort of come up with this idea of creating broadband and doing it through line of sight. And Ivan was heavily involved in this, and through a guy on Arran was how I got in touch with Ivan. But he was very interested, sort of in that IoT line of things. But I don't know what he's doing now. But Rachel, could you? I was really interested in all the things you were saying, but didn't really know what you were saying. Could you sort of give us a bit more in depth the sort of laser side and how you found a way into? I'm trying to remember. It was no, I'm not even going to try to say
optoelectronics.
There we are. Perfect. I knew what I was talking. I just wanted you to say it. You know.
Well, that is an interesting topic. So it sounds really bizarre now, but believe it or not, in those days. There was a whole thing about cleaning buildings because of the black, you know, and especially in Edinburgh. So I was part of a team that was commissioned to work with Historic Scotland, as it was then, to look at, you know, what kind of cleaning methods you could use in Edinburgh and not damage the stone. And some of those emerging techniques, we were moving away from wet, chemicals to lasers, and there was a whole interest in lasers that, again, you could now bring out of the lab into the field and clean something with them. And at the time there was a massive study being done at I've just forgotten the name. What's that huge church in France? Notre Dame. I was going to say Hunchback, but luckily my brain came with Notre Dame first. So they had, at that point, Notre Dame was the whole facade was being, and they had this laser up on the scaffold, and they were cleaning with it. So that was one of the programs. So I was involved in a team that had lasers, and we were looking to see, well, you know, how do you use these for stone? What's the real damage? You know, how do you? So, and that was how I got involved with the optoelectronics team, because they were building systems using lasers for all sorts of industry processes, like cutting through things and the spectroscopy. So that was how, and I was involved in this stone cleaning program, and that's how it all started. And it really opened my eyes to, what else could we do, you know, for these things. So yeah, it was really interesting.
As someone who did degree in agriculture and then food security and started working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I'm going to ask you a question that I really should be able to answer. How did you go from a PhD in soil science to that? What was the end?
It's just so, it's just being at the bench. So once you're the soil science or a microbiologist, you get to learn how to use all sorts of laboratory instruments to analyze stuff. So the project that I did after I finished my PhD in soils was just that. It was analysing stuff, understanding why organisms were growing on surfaces. We're looking at biocides, you see. So it was really linking. Again, it was linking the microorganisms from the soils and natural organisms in the environment, and understanding why they grew on certain surfaces, and then what kind of biocides might you use that wouldn't damage the stone but would still be effective. And that brought in the lasers as well. So it's all kind of mixed up. It was kind of 8 years, so it was all to do with the skills you learn as you're going through these programs, really. So
it's always quite fun to see how folk can go from just this thing over here to this thing over there. It's quite interesting. Pauline, what's the sort of, I don't think I fully grasped your job. It seems very intricate. What's a sort of day in the life of you like?
A day in the life at the moment. So I started in the digital dairy chain in November. So I'm fairly new to post, although I have worked for Strathclyde before, in the advanced manufacturing sort of a research area. But the first couple of months before Christmas was really just trying to get an understanding of what the project was about, very much what Stuart's been doing the last 3 weeks. Getting to know who's on the project. Obviously, you've got 3 academic partners, but we've also got a whole host of both funded and non-funded grant partners as well. So it's trying to get an understanding of what their sort of a role is, catching up with people, meeting up with people. Obviously, there's the variety of work packages within the programme, and the work package that I look after is all around innovation brokerage, and I'll give you a bit more information on that. So basically, our team, or my team, are kind of out and about liaising with SMEs within the region that the project covers, talking to them about issues that they might have, and it's basically any business involved in the dairy supply chain, so farmers, processors, cheese makers, ice cream makers, hauliers, trying to understand their challenges, and then link that back to the potential academic expertise that's available at the research institutions. So trying to, obviously, one of my roles is trying to get an understanding of what's available at Strathclyde. I've got guys looking at what's the SRUC and also at the University of West of Scotland as well. I'll do a wee plug just now, if that's all right, because this is one of the things that I'm kind of, it's became apparent as the team have been out and about and speaking to people that they are keen, they are interested in all their potential funding opportunities, but they're like, what's available, what's available with regards to opportunities, but also what's available with regards to the academic expertise. So it's become really apparent to me that we have to have some sort of a knowledge exchange event that's going to have to take place quite soon, that we're hoping to have actually in April, that will bring the expertise and the SMEs together in the same room to kind of have the right discussions and stuff that then can help hopefully develop and forge partnerships that then can access the opportunities that we have, whether it be funding or whatever it is. So yeah, that's something that I'm kind of moving quite quickly on at the moment.
If there's someone out there listening, Pauline, that is interested in that, where would sort of further information be? Would it be on a website or?
Yeah, on the website, and there's a newsletter, as if we're on LinkedIn, social media, Facebook, Twitter, all the information is out there. So, but that's what we're trying to do with this podcast as well, is get the name out there a bit more.
But hopefully I can be of assistance. I think this next question's for Stuart, but between the three of us, I'll let you decide who's best to answer it. Certainly, being based at Barony, we hear, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are sort of stakeholders in this, have heard of the digital dairy chain, they've heard of the nexus, they've heard of strength in places, or I can't remember exactly how that one's termed, and all this sort of stuff. And I think the truth is we don't maybe strictly know what is what. You guys are the digital dairy chain, and I'll be honest, when we originally made contact, I'd said I don't really know much about the nexus, and you said, well, it's not the same thing. So would you be able to sort of maybe give the listeners, and for that matter myself, sort of a bit of information on what the digital dairy chain is? Is it related to Nexus at all? Is there any crossover, and how that sort of works?
Yeah, I think taking a step back, and interesting what Pauline said, we're all relatively quite new to the project, and this has been one of the challenges, and as Pauline says, this is a great opportunity to get that out. So going right to the start, where did this all come from? Just for clarity, there's a non-departmental public body that the government set up called the UK Research and Innovation, and it's to look at business, energy, and industrial strategy. Now, essentially, what they try and do is they catalyse, invest in close collaboration with others, and try and build thriving, inclusive research and innovation systems. Now, that sounds all very complicated, but they're here to promote that type of element on behalf of government. And what they do is they have streams and tranches of funding. One of the funding that they do, one of their flagships, was called the Strength in Places programme. And very, very roughly, it's to fund areas where productivity and prosperity are often below the UK average. And anybody can apply for this funding. You put your application in, and you put a strong enough application in, and you win. And that's what SRUC and all the partners on this project did. So we applied for funding through that, and the project's been given £21 million across all parties. Without getting too deep and too political about it, I think it was also quite interesting. I don't know if you heard the Chancellor's Exchequer's speech, was it last Thursday or Friday, where he talked about his 4 E's, his enterprise, everywhere, education and employment. And he also talked about this magical word innovation, and how innovation was the golden thread that runs through all successful business projects and organisations in the UK. And if you listen to what he said, it was difficult not to listen and not think about the digital dairy chain project. So that's essentially what we're here. That's where we're going for. And very simply, the elevator pitch in it, it will offer a range of services of support for innovation and growth in the southwest of Scotland and in the northwest of England, in the Cumbrian region. In terms of Dairy Nexus, we are a separate project to that. As you say, that is a project around the Barony and building a dairy innovation centre there, and all around the ancillary things that will feed into that and come in and out of that. We do have a crossover, but we are distinctly different. As Pauline said, I've 21 days in the job. I hope that's a good description, but if they've got anything to add. The one thing I would add, again, probably the key message, I think, Wallace, on this is that partnership and collaboration is the key. That's what will grow this. As Pauline indicated, we've got a number of partners, and we're looking probably for as many people to get involved in this project as possible, because not only will the project grow, but will help the outcome of the project.
By partners, do you mean funding partners, Stuart, or other people getting involved in a sort of operation?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely anybody. Again, to give you an idea, the people we are working just now with and the people on this call, University of Strathclyde, University of West Coast of Scotland, Census, First Milk, Lactalis, Creamery at Stranraer, Kendall Nutricare, Cows & Co, which is linked to Appleby Creamery, a great cheesemaker, National Milk Records, Starch Sems, who are here to talk about and teach the next generation about science and technology. So these are all partners that are in the project. But I think through both Rachel and Pauline's work, we're stretching out to anybody from, and we talk about cow to consumer because they're handy that they both begin with C, but anybody in that chain that wants to get involved with dairy that can help innovation and add value to the dairy chain in the geographical area and we can hopefully identify their needs and hopefully meet them on this project.
That's a quite like moo to milk. I don't know where that came from, but anyway.
I'll use that. That's another good one. Yeah, glass to grass, cow to consumer, and moo to milk. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Please don't put my name next to it. You asked if I listened to the Chancellor Exchequer. No, I just don't watch the news. I really should watch it more because I'm just an uneducated person these days. But that gives sort of some clearance as to what's happening. And Pauline, you mentioned a plug earlier. I'll maybe plug one thing. You mentioned NMR, their National Milk Record Steward. I am actually the MC for the NMR Awards next month, which will have just happened on the weekend after this comes out. So it might have been an absolute disaster on my own part, but hopefully not. Passing over to you for a minute there, Rachel. Where does Census come in here? Stuart mentioned Census. What's their sort of role?
Right, so so we're one of the partners, as Stuart mentioned. So what we're doing is we're running an enabling technology accelerator that we call the Milk Round, and and that's really to help people build, test and trial new technologies, and they can be pre-startup, post-startup. They can be businesses all within the region, SMEs looking to diversify and build new things. So we're really, really excited about that because we, it's an accelerator that helps people engineer and build things. And then within the partnership, this is the really valuable, is open that technology up for trial or user experience tests within the partnership and wider, and helping them to get traction with potential first adopters, in these technologies and get real feedback. So that's what our program will do, the Milk Round. So we've got 25 spots over the next 4 years for applicants to run through that. And we've got some real interest, from very, very, including from farmers who have been, developing things, and they just need that little bit of engineering expertise or just help for us connecting things to the internet, for example, and enabling digital functionality in some of the things. So it's really exciting program.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think maybe when I'd heard about the digital dairy chain, I just had this idea that it was how we integrate data into dairy. Dairy is far ahead of most enterprises in farming at using data and using data to their benefit, utilising it the way that it's going to make their business more profitable and efficient. But this is digital input in general. It's everything. It's data. It's actual tangible technology, hardware, software. Right. Okay. So this is where I was maybe a bit confused. Okay.
I think so. Sorry, Rich. I think you're absolutely right, though, Wallace. That's one of the main objectives of the project. I mean, the other ones are basically, as has been discussed, is to stimulate research and development, and that will be to provide infrastructure and expertise to enable that. Also support business growth for early ventures, startup, established companies, and new product development. And the final tranche, really, where a lot of the time and effort's going into, is to attract talent and skills, showcasing this to new entrants coming in, because we can have all the first three things we talked about, but without the people coming through to engage in that in the short term, the long term, and when I'm long and gone, then the project wouldn't progress much forward. So that's the three main sort of legs of work on this project.
And Pauline, earlier you mentioned sort of getting various SMEs involved. Do you have a particular target? Well, I think we should maybe mention that SMEs, sort of small, medium-sized enterprises. Enterprises? No. Yes. What have you got a certain target that you're aiming for there, or just anyone that seems to be willing to get involved and has a reason to get involved?
Yeah, I think really at the moment, we're just getting the word out and about there, just trying to target as many SMEs within the region as we can, to kind of try and bring them on board. Now we've kind of talked about one of the keywords, the key I word is innovation, but obviously for us as well, another key I word is impact. The impact of this whole program. obviously there's going to be projects within it. People are going to run with things. But it's, you know, it's obviously really useful for us and for UKRI who are funding the programme as well, to see what the impact in the region is going to be. You know, we're obviously targeting as many people as we can at the moment, but we do have kind of individual groups within that. So we're looking at younger people coming into the dairy industry, women within the dairy industry and stuff as well. So we'll kind of be doing a bit of targeting around them as well.
Oh, that's quite interesting. Yeah. So when you mention younger people, are you talking students that are interested in industry, or are you aiming to try to get into schools as well and sort of talk about what's happening here?
Yeah, well, you know, there's one of the work packages that Stuart mentioned earlier is run by Smart STEM. So these are the guys who are actually out and about. So they're in the schools, they're in the local colleges, they're out speaking to people, they're taking school children out to farms and kind of doing all the fun stuff like the little experiments and all that sort of stuff. So it's that grassroots stuff.
Have you got, this is maybe like a side thing, are any of the three aware of RET? I don't know if that would be a crossover there.
Yeah, no. I had a conversation with somebody last week who are, the project is engaging with RET, because I mean they're a fantastic organisation, have good links on farm. Yeah, absolutely.
Just from the look in your face, Pauline, I'm guessing you haven't heard of them.
No, no, I haven't. As I say, because we're all kind of involved in a specific work package, but there's obviously a lot of crossover and collaboration between those work packages, in the sense that, you know, Rachel's looking after a work package, I am looking after a work package, but we guys, you know, we're getting together as much as we can just to kind of make sure that, you know, who's out talking to who, what are the ideas and stuff coming through, where do they need signposted to, because it might be that I've got an opportunity, you know, speaking to one of the SMEs and something comes up that maybe doesn't sit with within the opportunities that I have within my work package, but would fit within Rachel's. So we would kind of signpost that on.
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of background. Maybe it's more your target sort of pupil audience, if you will, is maybe secondary, but they're sort of quite heavily involved in the primary side. If you do want to check them out, plug R2Kast number 76 in there. But one more thing, when we're looking at these sort of SMEs you're targeting, one thing I meant to ask was, are you purely looking at businesses that have sort of diversified and whatnot, or are you also still focusing on the milk producing farmer? Is that someone you are aiming at that as well? Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, because I guess that was one question I really wanted to ask from the start, because that's sort of like the basis of which all of this is built on. So I'm glad to hear that. On the call today, we've sort of got yourself, Pauline, Rachel, and Stuart, and we could have had two more. How many people are involved in the dairy chain? Is that a massive answer? Is that an answer it's almost you can't answer? Is it, you know, what are we looking at here?
That's a very good question. Well, and yeah, I'm sort of well, no, I won't take a stab in the dark, because I think, like Pauline says, I think a number of work streams, and there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scene that everybody's working on. I mean, I'm just thinking aloud, even at SRUC, the people that I talk to internally about it, and you know, a lot of people are dipping a toe in the water on it. Yeah, so sorry, I couldn't hazard a guess. I don't know if Pauline or Rachel.
It's fine. It was just a sort of
there might be as many, just a massive stab in the dark, maybe about 20, 25 directly new roles being supported to roll out all of these programs, and then everybody else who is collaborating and with touch points. I've got the third parties and other strategic partners within the milk round, for example, are not directly funded or partners on the program, but they will help the milk round, for example. So they're kind of involved. So it's really big, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think that's a really good point, Rachel. I think it's quite difficult to quantify it. What I would say though, Wallace, is, I mean, again, I've only been in 3 weeks, and I think the thing that struck me is all the people involved so far, the enthusiasm, the determination for success, and the drive is quite incredible. I've never come across a project like this that exists so much. Everybody is very good. It's a super project to work on.
And I understand maybe this is one of the questions that, not that you're not allowed to answer, but it's just one of those ones that's very hard to know the answer to. We talk about this large funding stream of 20 or whatever the amount is, 20 million. Is that purely digital dairy chain, or is that separated amongst different areas here?
It's all within the dairy chain, but it is across a number of tranches of work packages, and which covers the four main elements of what I talked about. I mean, for example, as part of that, I was going to come on to maybe later, is one part is up to £3 million will be offered in collaborative research and development projects across the industry in the area. And there'll be it'll be announced soon actually, but there'll be an application process on that where companies can come and apply for that money, and that will be again worked out through the UK Innovate Fund. So yeah, there's quite large pockets of money across the whole project. And again, worth adding as well, it's a 5-year project, so we're here for quite a long time. But again, part of, I think, our thinking and what we do now is we must create a legacy that goes past that 5 years.
Well, I'm not someone who's, I was going to say, much any experience in these types of projects. Is a 5-year project a 5-year project, or can that continue after?
Absolutely. And again, without sounding like Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor Checker, I think that this project has to succeed on a number of fronts, but in some ways we've got to build the foundations for the future. I mean, we are here to for the benefit of Cumbria and southwest Scotland, and give that area a considerable boost, and it's important we do that. So yeah, the project will, if the project's successful and does what it says in the tin, it will go beyond the 5 years.
Yeah, I'll just add something in there, Wallace. So yeah, absolutely, because what tends to happen with these sorts of programs, I've worked on quite a few of them over the years, and as I said, obviously impact is a big thing. We're, as well as funding projects within the program from DDC funds, we'll also be looking at external opportunities for them. So we will be able to take a project or a business so far, but there's loads of other opportunities that we will hopefully be able to help support them going forward as well. And that might not necessarily be more funding. It could be help with like commercialization and spinning out or whatever it is that we would try and help them with as well.
Well, I think we mentioned sustainability. That's got to be worth you guys as well from a sustainability perspective. Because if you've got the industry on board in the local area, whether that's from financial assistance or, like you said there, assistance in starting up, consultation, whatever, then that's going to lead to that 5-year project we just mentioned being maybe just a business, just a thing that is part of the industry in this area. I think maybe one thing that would assist in fully getting why and how the digital dairy chain has came about is, we've mentioned this 5-year project. What is the sort of vision? Like what would in you guys' eyes be where you would want to see it? Maybe even just from your perspective or from a holistic perspective in 5 years. What's the goal here? Whoever.
Sorry, I was going to let other people come in. I think I think essentially what the project is here to do will deliver an uplift in the rural economies of Cumbria and the southwest of Scotland. And I think the dream is that it will establish the region as a leader in advanced, sustainable and high value dairy manufacturing and everything that comes with that. Work with the dairy industry to develop and introduce new technologies, sensing, data handling, as well as infrastructure support. And again, just as I said at the start there, the whole theory is to help Scottish and Cumbria dairy businesses develop new products and explore new markets. Now, again, very simply, the area produces 1.9 billion litres of milk. It's a key area to the UK, and it does, breaking news, it rains a lot here. We grow grass very well. The farmers at ground level are fantastic. They know what they're doing. And the processing supply chain as well. There's great opportunities in the area, and I think it's about that coming together to be seen as the southwest of Scotland and the northwest of England being the go-to area for dairy, and it's about making it resilient for the future. It's
the hub of dairy in the country. That's.
Yeah. There you go, Wallace. Yep, you're a better marketer than me. That's it summed up beautifully. Yeah.
I think that massive pause, Wallace, was all of us, the three of us, cast our minds back just this week where we had a meeting, and we went through all of the different ways that this project will be measured. And so I was just casting my mind back, because the project management, it's a huge program. Project management is it can't work without that. And we've just gone through how each of us are going to need to capture our impact, as Pauline was saying, how many new jobs, new businesses, new roles, new products, investment. So for the milk round, for me, it's about enabling net zero to meet that net zero massive challenge as well. Bringing new products in, transforming the technology base in the region as well, and trying to encourage investment in technology, not just from within the supply chain, but from companies maybe building new offerings, that are in the region into the dairy chain through their digital products. So yeah, it's a big program with lots of measurements and success measurements in it that we have to meet.
And when you're looking at success measurements and what metric means this has worked out and whatever, I think a lot of people will look at it and say it's a lot of money being pumped into it. But what we're not considering straight off is a massive employer. Mentioned we haven't got an exact figure, but there's a lot of people generating an income out of this. It's hopefully going to be, and I think listening to what's happening, it will be, is going to generate a pretty positive movement for the industry, especially in this area. And you mentioned about net zero there. I mentioned about the things that I've sort of said in the past, and I have a few issues with net zero and how it's calculated. But I think in general, with the calculators we use at the minute, certainly AgriCalc, dairy is the one that sort of comes out on top or bottom, I guess, in a good sense, is often seen net zero. But where, and maybe this is quite an interesting question for you, Rachel, I'll probably not manage to pose it as a question, more sort of say something and see what you think. But dairy comes out very well, often net zero, often carbon negative. But in my head, if you compare a dairy enterprise that's producing a high level of yield, compared to, say, for example, an extensive store lamb unit that's a low yield of product, protein going off that ground, but the inputs are so minimal over here, whereas they're higher. And now something like the digital dairy chain, in my head, and this is kind of a question, are they sort of looking at ways of bringing technology into dairy farming so that those inputs are minimal where possible? So you're synthetically moving water less, you're maybe finding ways that rations are coming from nearby, that sort of thing. Is that also integrated? Is that part of it as well, trying to just increase efficiencies and whatnot?
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
I think one of the things that when we were beginning to build the project proposal up, I went in because my job around Internet of Things is about efficiencies, economies of scale, and replacing some of the manual things with automated measurements and things like that. And when I mentioned the word efficiencies, a lot of the farming businesses who were brought in to help build the program very, very, vocal in saying it's not about efficiencies for us. It's about people valuing the milk and dairy as a high value product, and it comes from animals that are looked after in a natural way as well. So it maybe isn't about efficiency in that sense, but it's about recognizing the value of dairy as a food product and preserving or helping to create a natural environment around that creates additional value into that product as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. And also recognising the fact that certainly in the UK, for the most part, I think it would be wrong to say completely, we're probably promoting a premier product here. Our welfare and environmental standards are higher than, I'm not going to say everywhere, just about everywhere, for the most part. And I think you mentioned right at the start, Stuart, about sort of agricultural bill and whatnot. Trade deals and whatnot pose somewhat of a scary potential to the industry. What does that mean? Does it mean that litre of milk that sits on the shelf is going to sit next to the exact same litre of milk on the shelf, but be a lower quality product from a standards perspective? So I get that. I get the farmers' reasons for wanting that, and it sounds like you guys are on board with that. So that's good. That's good.
I think you're absolutely right, Willis. That the number of things you can't change in life: death, taxes, and milk price, and we can't control that, but I think we can create a resilience in the supply chain that can adapt to that. And if we can make the, through innovation, through productivity, through different thinking, through intelligence, data, if we can make the supply chain in the Northwest and the Southwest Scotland more resilient, then we'll be able to cope with some of the things that are going to come in the ag bill, some of the things that are going to hit us with milk price, some of the fallout of the issues of Brexit, consumer trends, that element. Yeah.
It's just tricky in that sort of perfect competition market structure we find ourselves in as a commodity industry. We've got so little power over it, but hopefully this sort of thing creates, I don't want to say the word union, we have a union, but creates the sort of strength in numbers that hopefully is worthwhile. Yeah. Listen, here we sat down best part of an hour ago, and I generally didn't know what digital dairy chain meant. I was like, what is this? And it's been great to sort of go over what it is, and hopefully those listening have a better idea. I have a question for all of you individually, the same question that I'll get you all to answer, and hopefully this might sort of tidy things up. If I was to ask you how you would explain the digital dairy chain to just someone that asked you in the street, how would you explain it?
I'll go for it. I mean, again, it's that classic elevator pitch. I would keep it simple as it's going to offer a range of services to support innovation and growth for the dairy supply chain in the southwest of Scotland and the northwest of England.
Rachel and Pauline, would your sort of takes be the same, or would you have any sort of looking at that?
I'd like to think it's a programme that's going to change people's whole perception of the dairy industry. Into a high value, wonderful dairy. It sounds like I'm plugging something, isn't it? But the dairy is a really it's an ancient industry, and it deserves that recognition of being a high quality product.
Mm-hmm.
I would just maybe add about really the strength, or it's about strengthening that link between academia and industry within this particular area. I think that's really key, and I think that's going to be really key for the programme as a whole.
I think I think all that makes sense, and I think one you sort of mentioned, Rachel, about it's been going on a while. Dairy, we've been milking cows for some time. I think one thing we sort of forget as the consumer, the masses sort of forget, we hear quite often, it never used to be that intense farming, it never used to be whatever, but it took till 1804 to hit 1 billion people on the planet, and now last November we've just hit 8 billion. It's been a rapid progression over the last 200 years. 19 years. So these industries have had, I'm sort of maybe aiming this at the listeners I have that aren't in farming. I have quite a few. That sort of intensification has ramped up hugely, but we have to consider what we're doing here, and what we're doing is feeding the planet. That's the job of this sector. So yeah, it sounds like from what we've spoke about today that you guys are hopefully going to be at the forefront of that, and it sounds like a very positive sort of move forward for the industry, especially in this area. Which might lead to, I don't know if the plan is, if this is sort of a pilot in this area and then to sort of allow that to roll out nationwide. Is that part of the plan, or is that maybe a hopeful?
No, well, the project is direct funding for the area that we're operating in, but you do raise an interesting point, though, that there will be a natural ripple effect, I think, that could benefit from this, and I hope a lot of the projects and a lot of the work that's done is seen as innovative and best practice, and then is mirrored in this ripple effect.
Excellent. Here, guys, it's been sorry.
I was going to say that when we start rolling out the innovations, that the early adopters will be amongst everybody in the dairy chain. So we want to raise that profile as well. So they'll be developed within the region. Then early adopters could be anywhere. So it's taking on those best practices and product opportunities.
Absolutely,
throughout.
Absolutely. No, it's been great to talk to you, because I think we arranged this maybe about a week ago, and for the last week I've been sort of thinking, I don't know where this is going to go, because as I mentioned at the start, it's new, it's only coming on the scene. You guys have all said that it's been a few months you've been involved, and sort of seeing how much you know and how passionate you are already, I think is very positive for the future of DDC. There's two questions normally I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. I've kind of already asked you one with, if you were to explain it in the street, how would you? But I'm going to pass a question around to all three individually again. And it's kind of a two-parter, but basically the same thing. One, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And two, where do you see the digital dairy chain in 5 years?
In 5 years, I will hopefully still be working on the project. I think the project, from what I've seen and felt and heard and talked to people, I think the project will be a great success. And again, I think the important thing is this whole element of legacy, that in 5 years we'll be looking at the next 5 years on the project.
Brilliant. Rachel, Polly?
I'd like to be celebrating with all the applicants from the milk round their new products and services, because I'm so excited to see what comes out of that. I really am. Good.
I think I would just echo what Stuart said, just around the success of the programme, and having something established that we could potentially use as a sort of a blueprint to do within other areas would be great.
Excellent. No, it's been as I said, it's been great having you on. I've really enjoyed the chat. I hope you guys have enjoyed coming on. I hope it's been beneficial from your end as well. Hopefully you've got the story across you were aiming for.
Sorry, Wallace, what I would say is just to everybody and all the listeners is, is hopefully, I think one of the messages that's come out is the project is still quite young, and between ourselves, Rachel and Pauline, we're still quite new to it. So what I would say is, I think the project, to a degree, there's elements that it can still be molded. So if people want to get involved, just get in touch and engage with us. Reach out to us. The website is www.digitaldairychain.co.uk. Have a look at that. It's a fantastic website that's been set up, and it goes through, I think, a lot of the things that we've all discussed tonight, and maybe lays it out a bit more easily, bite-sized chunks to understand. But I think the main point for me is about working together in collaboration. So if anybody thinks that this project has value, then please get in touch, and there's enough people to engage and get involved.
Well, I mean, I certainly think personally, I can't speak for SRUC, but SRUC are obviously involved. But from an academia perspective, I think we'd probably like to certainly be around, be involved, and whether that involvement includes student dissertations or just general education throughout. Looking at integration of data. We've just did the next gen change in education, as Stuart, you were at our sort of stakeholder day there on Friday. We've had the HNC the first year, it's went well. It's had teething issues, of course it has, but we're moving into HND, and then just by its very nature for the third and fourth year into honours, which you'll see a lot of looking at progressive techniques and whatnot. So I think that would be a good relationship to create there, I would say. But no, it's been great. I appreciate all your time. I do. It is a Sunday night we're filming this, so, and I'm also conscious there is one person here that wants to see Happy Valley, and I don't
it's
know
not me.
It's we won't call it who it is. They can choose if they want. There is some important Sunday night TV to be watched, but thank you very much for coming on. It's been interesting to hear about the digital dairy chain, and I hope the three have enjoyed your time chatting to me. For those of you still listening, guys, as we said last week, Blythe Aitken told us about agronomy in Zimbabwe, which was quite interesting. The podcast is certainly going quite global these days. We've had Zimbabwe, we've had America, we've had Canada, we've had so many places these days. So go and check some of those out. Also, this Friday will be Sophie, keep getting her name wrong, Sophie Mitchell-Smith, talking about hoof trimming and how she's created a business there. So there's more and more stories coming out, more and more coming forward. Hopefully, for R2Kast number 100, we can really sort of get a big one. I've got a few in mind, Caleb Cooper, Amanda Owen, whatever, we'll see. But if you've got any contacts that could lead me to some of those people, do get in touch, because albeit R2Kast 100 is 15 away, that is only about 2.5 months, because we're throwing quite a few out now. So thank you very much for listening. We'll see you on Friday with Sophie, and thank you to Stuart, Pauline and Rachel today as well. Thank you very much.
I hope you've enjoyed another excellent episode of the R2Kast. I just want to take this moment to quickly thank our primary sponsors once more, A-Plan Rural. If you follow A-Plan on social media, you'll see the work they're doing to really promote British farming and back our industry. It's been a pleasure working alongside A-Plan Rural so far, and long may it continue. The values of A-Plan Rural runs perfectly in line with the whole mantra of Rural to Kitchen, and I'm glad to have them on board. Check them out on Instagram at A-Plan Rural and on Facebook at A-Plan Rural Insurance. See you for the next podcast.